Hello everybody, this is Valencia and welcome to my channel Balloons and Business, where I show you the business of balloon and event decor. So today I'm going to show you how I made this Barbie themed balloon garland from beginning to end. And I think that this is one of the easiest ways to learn how to make a balloon garland, even for beginners. Now just a note, this will be a longer tutorial video than I normally make, but I wanted to do this in more detail so that it is easier to follow. So if you want to see how I did this, just stay tuned. Okay, so let's get started. So the first thing I'm going to do is blow my balloons up. I'm going to round them out by pressing them down onto a surface while releasing air from the top, because you don't want coney shaped balloons. And then I'm going to tie them together into a dupe, which is two balloons tied together. So for all of my dupes, I'm going to be tying together an 11-inch balloon and a 17-inch balloon. That's all my dupes, and I'm using three colors: Sempertex Fuchsia, Sempertex Pastel Pink, and Sempertex White. Now, if you want a fuller garland, you want to add those larger 17-inch balloons into the garland base. So now I'm going to twist my dupes into clusters. So I'm going to double twist my dupes into a cluster, and you double twist so that the dupes won't pop out of the cluster. And I'm twisting together 4 dupes of each color into a cluster. So that's 4 dupes of fuchsia in one cluster, 4 dupes of pastel pink in one cluster, and 4 dupes of white in one cluster. And I'm going to make 2 clusters of each color, 2 fuchsia, 2 pastel pink, and 2 white clusters. I measured my backdrop, figured that I needed a 12-foot balloon garland base, and since each of these clusters is about 2 feet, I figured I needed a total of 6 clusters, or 2 clusters of each color. So I'm going to be using my Sempertex 260Q white balloons. I'm going to tie the ends together to make like a rubber band, and then I'm going to use these to connect my clusters together. So I'm going to take my 260, wrap it around a couple of balloons within one cluster, and then I'm going to take another cluster, add it on top, and I'm going to wrap that 260 around at least 2 to 3 balloons in the new cluster. And you want to wrap it around as many balloons as possible so you can get those clusters nice and connected. So I'm just going to keep doing this process. I'm going to tie my 260 Qs into like a rubber band. I'm going to wrap it around a couple of balloons in the cluster already attached to the balloon garland. I'm going to twist it around one time, and then I'm going to add another cluster and wrap it around a few balloons in that new cluster. You want to try to get around 3 balloons. If you can only do 2, that's fine, but preferably 3. So for those of you that are curious, the reason why I use 260Q balloons instead of rubber bands is because I believe 260Qs are more elastic than the rubber bands, so I can get them around more balloons. Because the more balloons that you're able to wrap inside of those 260Qs, the more stable and connected and tight that balloon garland is going to be. If you're only able to get it around 1 balloon in each cluster, then you only have 1 point of connection. You want as many points as possible. Now you can arrange your clusters in whatever pattern you want. I chose this pattern because it looks like an ombre, where you have the dark fuchsia at the bottom, and then it goes up to the pastel pink, and then it goes up to the white, and then starts all over again. So that's why I chose this pattern. So here is my 12-foot balloon garland base. So I'm going to measure it up against the backdrop, make sure that it's the length that I want, and then I'm going to proceed from there. So now it's time to make my 5-inch clusters. I'm using a hand pump because it's easier to blow it up, and I'm doing 4 pumps per balloon, and I'm just rounding the balloons out, tying them into dupes. Then I'm going to take 2 dupes and twist them together into clusters of 4, and then I'm going to take 2 of those clusters and tie 1 on each end of a 260Q balloon. And I'm going to make 1 of those for each larger cluster of balloons. So I'm going to have 2 of these in pastel pink, 2 of these in fuchsia, and 2 of these in white. I'm going to be using this backdrop clip, and I bought these from the 99-cent store. They come in packs of 4, and I'm going to tie a 260Q together like a rubber band, like I did before. And I'm going to put this 260Q in the mouth of the backdrop clip. Twist it around, put it in again, and twist it one more time. And that's going to be how I'm going to attach the balloon garland to the backdrop. Now, I decided to challenge myself and do this setup outside in my front yard. It was a challenge because my yard is not even. The lawn is not even. So I had some difficulties with making sure I got my backdrop secure, but I liked the sunlight coming through, so it made for good natural lighting so you guys can really see what I'm doing. So I used a trash bag right there so that the balloons will not touch the grass. And I'm putting on my backdrop clip. And then I'm just going to take that 260Q rubber band and wrap it around a balloon in the balloon garland. And that's how I'm attaching it to the backdrop. And I'm attaching it at 4 points. Now my backdrop came up just a little bit. That's because I didn't put enough weight at the bottom. I would suggest you put about 2 cinder blocks, 1 on each side, to really, weigh it down, especially since this is an uneven surface. So I'm going to show you up close how I did this. I'm just going to put that clip onto the backdrop. Then I'm going to take that 260 and wrap it around a balloon in the balloon garland. I'm aiming for the 11-inch balloons because they're easier to wrap around. Then I'm going to move that balloon garland over so that I can cover up that clip. Now I attached these clips at 4 points on this backdrop. So 1 at the very top and then 3 on the side. Now notice the shape of this balloon garland. As you see, the white cluster is going up like towards the sky, and I preferred that because I didn't want it wrapping around the L shape, covering up the whole backdrop. So I'm adding some clusters of balloons to the bottom of that balloon garland because I really wanted to spread out on the floor. I want my balloon garland to touch the ground at the bottom and spread out. So I'm adding in a cluster of 3 dupes or 6 balloons, just like the original clusters I added in at the balloon garland base. And I'm just moving it around. And that's the advantage when you use 260Qs in this way. You can really move those clusters around and figure it out the way you want. And I don't want to cover that Barbie up. So I'm trying to spread it out in the opposite direction. So I'm adding these clusters, and this cluster is a little bit smaller. I think it just has 4 balloons or 2 dupes. And I'm just trying to get it to spread out a bit. Kind of look almost like a triangle where it's larger on the bottom and it starts narrowing just a little bit as it goes up. And you see how it's covering that B for the Barbie? I don't like that. So I'm going to maneuver those clusters around until I get it from in front of that B. I don't like that. So I decided to add 1 more cluster of fuchsia balloons at the bottom, and that's 2 dupes. And I wanted to talk about how many balloons I used for this balloon garland. Normally I lose count, but this time I decided to keep count because I get asked this question a lot. So I used 48 balloons for the balloon garland base, 21 balloons I added to make the balloon garland thicker, and 54 5-inch decorators for a total of 125 balloons. So now I'm liking the way that the bottom looks. It's spread out more at the bottom. So now I'm going to add a couple more clusters as I'm going up the balloon garland. So I decided to add another cluster of pastel pink, and that is 2 dupes. This time around, I just tied one end of the 260Q to the cluster I'm adding and wrapped the other end of the 260Q around a couple balloons in the existing balloon garland, wrapped it back around the new cluster, and then tied the 260Q into itself. And that is another way to add balloons using 260Qs. And then I had to add some more white because you could barely see that white in the center right there. And that's just a cluster of 3 balloons, 2 17 inches and 1 11-inch balloon that I used the rubber band method to add in there. So after rearranging it, I decided that this is the shape that I liked. I felt like it was full enough for me. And so now I'm going to add in my 5-inch decorators. So I made one of these per cluster, just like I said before. So I'm going to wrap that 260Q all the way around one balloon so the 260Q doesn't pop out. And then I'm just going to arrange the 5-inch decorators the way I want. The 260Q makes it easy for you to stretch those balloons across the cluster and get it to where you want. And I'm going to do it again for the pastel pink. Just wrap that 260Q around the balloon at least one time so it doesn't pop out. And then just arrange them the way you want. Now, since I made that bottom cluster bigger than the others, I'm going to end up adding another cluster of 5-inch decorators at the very bottom of that fuchsia pink cluster using one 260Q, or you can just cut the 260s in half to save on material if you're only adding one 5-inch cluster. So I'm using these foil silver holographic heart balloons to add, and I'm using 260Qs. So you saw me tie that 260 around the neck of that heart balloon, and then I'm going to just wrap the two ends of that 260Q around the balloon within the balloon garland and tie the two ends together. I prefer using 260Qs to attach mylars and foil balloons because then if you don't like the way it looks, you can change it. If you use glue dots, you pretty much, you're stuck. So you see me just rearranging these balloons, trying to get them to look the way I want it to look. I don't want it to like pop out of the balloon garland. I want it to really nestle in there like it looks like it's part of the balloon garland. And I actually ended up rearranging that very top balloon. I added a cluster of 4 5-inch decorators to that foil balloon at the top. So it looks like it's nestled into the balloon garland and that it's not just like popped out from it. You really want everything to look cohesive and like it's together. Now it's time to add the balloon shine to restore the shininess to these balloons because you need those shiny balloons for this Barbie backdrop. I'm using Mega Shine and I've been using this a lot more than the High Shine that I used to use. I like the way the finish looks. It sprays on much more evenly and it smells like bubble gum. Now here's a huge tip. If you are a balloon designer, you do not want to do balloon garlands in direct sunlight because no matter how quality your balloons are, they're always susceptible to popping, especially in hot weather. So you want to do underneath a shaded area, a tent, a patio, gazebo, under a tree, but just not in direct sunlight. Please make sure that you discuss this with your client ahead of time so you don't have to deal with this last minute. So this is the finished product to the Barbie themed balloon garland. So if you want to know where I got my balloons from, as well as the Mega Shine, I will leave the link to those items in the description box below. And if you want to know how I made this Barbie backdrop, I will be posting a video to that soon. And when I do, I will leave the link in the description box below this video. So if you enjoyed this tutorial and found it helpful, go ahead on and like it and please subscribe and you'll get notifications on future videos on balloon and event decor. And until next time, I'll see you guys later.